Episode 12. You Want My Money? As well as his parents, two of Keith's aunts were at the house, Mimi and Sandra. Sandra had also brought her two kids, Keith's cousins. Keith wanted to say hello to all of them. The food was already prepared, and it seemed that everyone was waiting for him. Keith could tell something was up. He looked from the troubled expressions on his parents' faces to the way his aunts were eyeing him, and he wondered what was going on. The only person he couldn't see was his sister, Megan. Megan was a bit of a wild child, and Keith had no idea where she might be. Sure enough, after only a few mouthfuls, Aunt Sandra said, "So, Keith, I heard about the bank robbery from your dad. The mayor's office rewarded you with $20,000, right?" Keith nodded honestly and said, "Yes, that's right." Sandra looked delighted. "And you know that the college entrance exam is coming up. Jaden's been scoring so high that he'll have no problem getting into his first choice school." Keith frowned a little as he started to see where this might be going. "Well," Sandra beamed, "I've already told your dad that the $20,000 can go toward Jaden's tuition. Once he earns it back in the future, he can pay you back." Keith was stunned. He looked at his father and saw the resignation on his face. He must have had an idea of what was going on. Keith's father was an honest man, and Sandra was an unreasonable woman. She knew how to get what she wanted, and once she started making a fuss, his father had probably been browbeaten into agreeing to her request. Keith's mother, Angela, was kind by nature, but she'd never stand up to her sisters-in-law. If his father agreed, his mother would go along with it. Keith frowned and looked at his cousin Jaden, and then at Sandra. Her smile remained enthusiastic, but there was a hint of disdain in her eyes. Keith smiled and said, "Sorry, Aunt Sandra. I really need that money. I'm sure you'll find somewhere else to borrow Jaden's tuition money." "What?" Sandra couldn't sit still when she heard his reply. She said angrily, "You're just a police technician. What do you need the money for? A family's money should be spent where it's needed most. Jaden is going to college soon. He needs to pay tuition, living expenses, and so on. He needs to get a girlfriend. He needs money for real things. We only want to borrow it. It's not like you won't get it back." His cousin Jaden, who'd been silent all this while, said proudly, "Don't worry, Keith. When I graduate, I'll start my own business. I'll make sure to look after you then. You won't have to be a police grunt anymore. Invest in me now. I'll make it worth your while in the future." Keith could hear they were mocking him. His stomach clenched, but on the surface he stayed cool. "Hey, Aunt Sandra, didn't you borrow $7,000 from my dad last year? And you still haven't paid a single cent back, right? So why are you borrowing money again?" Jaden shut his mouth and didn't say another word, but Sandra replied, "Your father and I are siblings. It's what family does." She sniffed. "And what's gotten into you? You used to be so well-mannered. Is this what they teach you down in the precinct? To disrespect your elders?" Keith took a sip of his Coke and said lightly, "No, this is what you've taught me, Auntie. I'm only imitating your way of speaking to people." Sandra's mouth dropped open, and Keith carried on. "Uncle Mike's been in business all these years. Are you seriously telling me you and your husband can't afford your own son's tuition fees? Speaking of which, I've been meaning to drop by your place to ask about the money you already owe us. You've been borrowing bits here and there for years. I think it's around 40 or 50,000 by now, right?" Sandra choked on her soda. But Keith didn't let up. Since you're here now, I'll ask you straight. When are you going to return our money? The room was stunned into silence. Compared to before, Keith seemed like a whole different person. In the past, he was submissive and obedient, but now, not only was he refusing to give away his money, he was even asking his aunt to pay back what she owed. As Sandra gaped at him, she wondered who the hell this new Keith was and what he'd done with her nephew. As they stared at their son, Keith's parents' eyes grew as big as dinner plates, but it was Sandra who looked like she might keel over any minute now. For a moment, no one said a thing. The scene was incredibly awkward. Keith took another mouthful of soda and continued to look at Sandra calmly. His aunt had always bullied him. Keith's father had suffered a lot from her. His parents were honest, and his sister was still young. Well, Keith wasn't to let them put up with Sandra's crap any longer. Sandra was furious. This little punk had dared to talk back to her, and now he was demanding that she pay back the money? It was intolerable. She stood up and angrily addressed Keith's father. We agreed on this, Sam. Why are you letting your son change your mind now? Are you the man of this house? Sam took a swig of beer before answering, but when he tried to get up and say something, he was stopped by Keith. Sam looked down in confusion at the hand on his shoulder. It had a gentle but irresistible power to it. Looking at his son's calm, composed expression, a light bulb clicked on in Sam's head. His son had grown up. The little hands that used to cling to his dad had become strong and capable. Sam had worked hard for over half of his life, but he'd still managed to raise his son properly. The realization made him feel sad and gratified at the same time, and his eyes grew a little misty. Without saying a word, he lowered his head and took another sip of beer. This time, it didn't taste so bitter. Keith spoke up. I don't think you're in a position to ask who the real man is, Sandra, when you're here asking your brother for more money while your husband sits at home. Sandra's face turned ugly. On the other side of her, Keith's other cousin, Travis, stood up and yelled, You saying my dad isn't a real man? Say it again. I dare you. Smash. Keith slammed his hand on the table and it broke with a sharp crack. The dishes clattered to the floor. Keith stood up suddenly and said in a cold voice, What? So you can talk down to people, but no one else is allowed to talk back, is that it? He stepped up to Travis and said slowly, Listen carefully. If you're going to come around here and say my father's not treating his family right, you better be prepared to hear some home truths in return. Understand? A powerful aura seemed to crackle in the air around Keith, and the rest of the family felt a chill run down their spines. Travis was afraid. With a jolt, he remembered that only a few days ago, Keith had single-handedly dealt with 3 armed robbers. Travis started to tremble uncontrollably. Looking back at Keith's terrifying eyes, he fell to the ground. Keith looked down at his cousin and then turned to Sandra. When he saw the fear on their faces, he knew he'd achieved the desired effect. He snorted and said, We're all family here. I won't argue with you anymore. But if you dare speak rudely to my parents again, don't blame me for the consequences. As the saying went, nice guys finish last. In the past, his family was too accommodating. But now, Keith would make sure that the situation was reversed.